Hey everybody, it's Ben here, and today I want to go over the projects that I've done in this year, 2022. I don't always get to document my projects by video as well as I would like to, but I am a visual person and I do tend to take a lot of photos. So I have a lot of projects that I didn't necessarily make a full-length instructional video on, but I do have photos of. So I thought what we'd do is just go through my photo album and do a little video year in review of my projects. So to start with, way back in January, I worked on an electric wheelbarrow. I actually did document this one pretty well, so I don't want to go too deep into this. But essentially what it was is there was a guy who had a bunch of these wheelbarrow frames that they originally ran on gas engines, and he wanted to see about converting them to electric. So I put the work into that to do that project, and I actually ended up using a little Ryobi electric motor off of a push mower, and it really worked pretty well. I mean, it was maybe about a horsepower, ran on two of those 18-volt batteries and worked just great. The guy who wanted this done, he and I didn't have exactly the same views on what he wanted for a video and what his expectations were and all. So that was kind of a one-off project, but it actually did work pretty well, which was kind of cool. The other thing that was kind of neat is right at the beginning of this year, I got my YouTube award for breaking 100,000 subscribers, which felt pretty good. And if you're one of my subscribers, thank you very much for subscribing. I'm just going to be kind of scrubbing through the photos here, getting up to the good stuff. I do actually have a lot of animal photos in here too. Last year, summer, we found 4 orphaned kittens that were apparently born under our front porch, back porch, and we fed them, so now we have 4 cats. And also, speaking of animals, my daughter has pet rats, so for the science fair, we built a rat maze, which actually was a pretty cool project. Had a ton of people. It was the best exhibit at her school science fair. This past winter, I had some issues with the heat in my Chevy Volt. I put some work into that here. I'm removing the wheel interior fender on the passenger side to get at this little pump down here. It's sort of a heat circulating pump that had gone bad. I did a lot of other dinking around as well with that heat, but still never got it working quite right, which was disappointing. And actually, as of right this moment, the heat in my Chevy Volt still does not work. I did go through, find some parts like a certain valve you got to declog, some things like that. Not long after that, ran into an issue with our Toyota Prius, which had been sitting for a while. We had bought the Volt. We kept the Prius around in case the Volt didn't work for whatever reason. It was a used car. It was in a crash. Wanted to make sure everything worked right. But while the Prius was sitting around, and then it sat around for a while because of the pandemic, nobody was buying or selling or anything, one of the cells in the Prius went bad. And it took a little while for our schedules to work out where I could get my friend Eric to come out because he's done a ton of work on Priuses. And we were able to go through, find the bad cell. Here in this photo, you can see some corrosion right here, for example. We cleaned this all up. We pulled the bad cell out, we put it all back together, and then the Prius worked exactly the way it was supposed to again, which was great because otherwise it was just sitting there being completely unusable because that big red triangle of death. And here's one of the cats. This spring I bought a Ryobi 14-inch electric chainsaw. This uses their 40-volt system. It's the first tool that I bought of the 40-volt system. It's brushless. This one was reconditioned, so I got it for $100, including the saw, the charger, and the 40-volt battery. Nice 5 amp hour size battery here. Really worked great. I was very impressed with it. Did a very nice job just for general brush work and things like that. The types of things a typical homeowner has to do. And what else is cool about this is it's just a good battery platform, and we'll show a project about that later. Here's the science fair rat maze, including a video of what we did for our experiments, trying to get the rats to learn the maze using food treats. And my daughter's project was very popular. Here is a photo between the waves of students coming to see it. Here she is handling one of the animals. But what was really neat was when there were actual classes there, it was like 4 or 5 students deep coming to see it. So here, just look at how many kids are checking out the project. It was pretty cool. In mid-March, I bought a used Chevy Volt battery pack. This was mostly because it was a pretty good deal, and it's the kind of not what you know, who you know. A guy I know who's really connected with the aftermarket EV industry tipped me off to this. So I drove out towing a trailer with my Volt. Electric vehicles are great for towing, in case you didn't know that. And I picked up this battery, brought it back home heavy. Got to use the engine hoist to move this thing around. And then went ahead to start taking it apart. Really pretty neat to take something like this apart, see what's inside, see how it works. And what I was generally thinking was that this would be good components to use for that electric tractor project, which I still have going on. There was definitely a bad section of cells in here, but all the rest of them were good, along with the pump and the other equipment. Pretty cool to see how all this works. And I did shoot a fair amount of video on this, so I'll have links in the video description to me working on that as well. Now, after I'd gotten that battery pack apart, I did make it into some smaller blocks that I played around with, and I was taking a look at how that would work out with that tractor project. And it looks like basically, one big hunk of that battery would fit in. Unfortunately, Chevy Volt batteries are not as energy dense as would be ideal, partly because of the cooling and some other things that are on there, but certainly one hunk would fit in there. Another exciting thing was that I finally bought myself a 3D printer. I got an Ender, works really nice, just a little bit of basic assembly, but other than that, right out of the box, it worked great. I was just thrilled about that, and I started a little bit of work in 3D printing, first just hitting a few samples and things like that. But then my first real project was I started playing around with some 3D printing to combine Ryobi batteries with a light bulb. And that whole project, kind of a little prototyping here and all, I had somebody else help me out with some of the 3D modeling. And by the time I was done, I ended up with, well, this is one of the prototypes still, but basically a project where I could put a light bulb directly on a Ryobi battery, just a 3D printed part. And then what I did is I used nickel strip, the exact same type that you would use like if you're building your own 18650 batteries and you're going to be spot welding them together. That exact same style of nickel strip kind of wiggles its way through this part to make the electrical connections from the battery to the light bulb there. There you can see the conductor on the outside of the base. That's what it looks like going to the battery. And these Lemeng light bulbs work really well. They're marked as 12 volt, but they're really 12 to 24 volt. So they're perfect to use with a 18 volt battery. In fact, I was doing some work on my car, and right away I got to test it out. Really works very well as just an all-purpose utility light. I also did a little bit of work with 3D printing. I made a lampshade and kind of some variations on this. And then it was my first big 3D printer project. What I have here is I found a model and I decided to 3D print the moon. Except this is it's a moon lamp, and it took quite a while to print. I was doing it on, I think, the second highest print quality, and it's an 8-inch sphere. It's pretty large. It took basically a week. It was like 100 hours of print time, which was ridiculous. Except, check this out here. This is while it's printing, and I'm simply shining just a flashlight down into it. And what's cool is the various thicknesses of the globe make it I think it's called a lithophane, where basically the thickness creates the differences in light and dark, which is very, very cool. Here we are, most of the way printed, still just shining a light into it. And then when it was finally done, here's some other things. I stopped out at the local hardware store. Here's some glass globes used for lighting. But we put this up in my daughter's room and lit up. Holy cow, it really looks like the moon. So what I did is I designed a little plug to fit in the back of this model that I downloaded, and then put some pipe nipple and the cord through there so that I can wire it up for a light. Now I had to use kind of a candelabra style bulb because the hole was relatively small, but then I could just have the whole thing as a hanging lamp. And the type of a bulb that I used was a color changing one that I mail ordered, and so it's kind of cool. I just really like the way the moon lights up. And then with the little remote control and the color changing candelabra bulb, you can make it any color you want. And for a kid's room, have a remote control, have the moon in any color. Boy, I just thought it turned out really great. I was really excited about that. And I really didn't get much of this on video. So again, this is kind of why I want to share it with you right here now like this. I do have one video clip here. If I'll play back right away. This is like the disco color changing mode on that light bulb. It's a little fast. I wish there was a slower option, but the colors are pretty amazing. So here's a DeLorean that was converted to electric. I did get an interview with the builder of this car, and he also did an electric Land Rover, both really cool projects. One of the other big wacky projects this summer was I got my hands on a Solar City H6 hybrid inverter. These were used with the original Tesla Powerwalls, and one thing that's cool about them is you can run them on grid, off grid, but they can also take in pretty high voltage. So I thought it'd be perfect to work for pulling energy out of a car. So here I have a 3D printed CHAdeMO connector, and I did some experiments actually drawing power out of the car, doing a vehicle to load or vehicle to home kind of a setup. And overall, it worked pretty well. Here I've got a generator connection I was using to go from the inverter to the main power panel in my garage. And I actually was able to charge one electric car from another electric car by drawing power out through the CHAdeMO port. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then the other thing kind of neat is that, being able to rig all this together, electric cars as battery sources, electric cars charging, solar, all working together. Another cool thing I got to work on was I was a consultant with some students at University of Wisconsin-Platteville. This was in the engineering department. And so I did get to stop out there when all the students were presenting their projects, including these students who they took a tractor and they converted it to electric. I consulted with them in terms of what they wanted to use for batteries and things like that. And it was really a pretty cool project. Here, they're just using a few Nissan Leaf batteries, but it's all set up that there's plenty of room that they could certainly add more. They used an E-Tech style motor, permanent magnet pancake motor, daily BMS. It was pretty cool. It was really a neat project, and it was cool to see a real world application being shown off. Here's that tractor just running around the quad. And here's one of their advisors and a couple of the students. Ever see an electric car that has like a really cool light around the charging port? You can do the same thing with a light up dog collar. I bought 2 of them by mail order for $10. So now my car can do the same thing too. So this is my car with a light up dog collar. This summer was also the first time that I saw Rivian in the wild. Just out driving on the freeway, sure enough, there was a Rivian. Pretty cool to start to see these trucks out there. I just also wanted to share with you, I like animals. Have some fun animals come through our backyard sometimes. Here's a possum, not only nibbling on our cat food, but also using the water dish. And if you look here, I can't tell for sure, but it looks like that's a possum with babies in the pouch right there. Thought that was cool. So some more work continuing on that vehicle to load kind of a setup with that Solar City inverter. On the left here, what you see is that's a pre-charge circuit. And what I was actually working on at this point was I accidentally hooked up something in reverse and I fried the one solar input circuit on it. Fortunately, the other was still good, so I was glad about that. But I'm just checking through everything, seeing if there's any obvious spot that there's any kind of fried electronics or anything. And of course, when I'm making videos, I gotta, take a photo, make a silly face for the YouTube thumbnail. We're back to the 3D printed connector here. This is what I was using for the CHAdeMO. I've got a fuse inside. Use some 9mm solid copper rod for the main power connections, things like that. And then I was going to show off the project at the Midwest Renewable Energy Association Energy Fair, except it's way further than my little cow car can drive in a single trip, and we don't have great quick charging facilities around me. So I decided to tow my Mitsubishi i-MiEV electric car with my Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid car. It's a rear-wheel drive car, so I spun it around on the tow dolly, and it towed absolutely fantastic up to the event. And then I showed off the i-MiEV with that system. So right here you can see the light bulb on. And what happened was everything worked great. Everything had worked exactly the way it was supposed to with this project. I did a presentation on it. That was great. But once I was ready to actually show it off to real live humans, a fuse blew. I don't know why. Couldn't figure out why. I popped in some fresh fuses. They blew again. So, kind of Murphy's Law, the one time you really want to be able to show something off, that, of course, is when it's not working. After that, I said I'd come back, take a look at this project some more, but it kind of got set to the side for a while I was working on some other things. Also at the Energy Fair, a couple of Rivian trucks up there. Pretty cool to see this one up close. Here, a private owner had a little hot plate plugged right in. He was boiling water, making instant noodles for dinner or something like that. Another guy here, you got to have some Wisconsin beer when you come out and visit. This is in the gear tunnel in the Rivian. So always fun to get to see new vehicles like this. And one that was pretty cool was that there was a Solectrac electric tractor at the Energy Fair this summer. I got to take a look at that. I did get some footage of it running around, and then actually getting to talk to somebody who owned it was really very interesting stuff. So I do have a little bit of video footage of that tractor in operation. It's nothing too exciting, though. It's mostly just driving around, raising and lowering the bucket. But it's all electric, no gas, no diesel. I got an electric mobility scooter from a friend of the family. She was just looking to get rid of it, knew that I was interested in electric stuff. So I got it, and it wasn't in running condition, but I very quickly fixed it up. And of course, very first thing is my daughter wanted to zip around the driveway like it was a race car. But rather than use this as some sort of a project, I think I'm actually going to keep this and use it as a mobility scooter. I do have a relative who doesn't get around so well anymore, and I think this will be something nice to have available for her. Although Sophie certainly did enjoy driving it down the street. Okay, here's another goofy project. My daughter Sophie here was in summer school, and every time I'd go over to pick her up, there'd be like fifth grade boys saying, "Moo the car, honk the horn," or I'd honk the horn. They'd be like, "No, it's got to go moo." So I finally got around to actually making the car go moo. And what that was is it's a custom audio system that I installed. I used a little soundboard from Adafruit, and I hooked it up with a loudspeaker and some other equipment, power supply, and I rigged up a little button off to the side here. And basically what it does is when I press the button, it plays back an MP3 file through this loudspeaker I put under the hood. And I've actually got it set up so there's multiple sound effects. And so it'll do one of 10 different moos. I actually have that labeled as moo. Here's the audio amplifier that I used. And then I just had that rigged up with a push button. I thought about a different style button, but just a real compact one seemed to work the best. There's the Arduino soundboard. Just a connection to the amp. Power from the cigarette lighter for the project. USB adapter. Little headphone connector. And then all of this together, I cleaned it all up and stuck it in kind of that center console so it's all out of the way. Hot glue works pretty good for holding, for strain relief on wires. Also for transporting that mobility scooter, I was trying to figure out the best way to do that, and I do have a 2-inch hitch receiver on the back of my iMeave. So what I did is I just slightly modified this cargo carrier that I had, and it's pretty low to the ground. It's real easy to get that mobility scooter onto there, put a strap on it, and transport that mobility scooter. There it is in my backup camera. And this is one thing that's really nice with electric vehicles is they really do tow very well. And doing something like having a hitch on your electric vehicle is a great way to get a lot more use out of it. So earlier I had talked about having that 40-volt electric chainsaw. And actually a couple years back, a friend of mine gave me his old electric bike kit, which was a 500-watt front hub motor. And what I did is I put that on an old bike frame that I had, and then I rigged it up using that 40-volt lithium battery, because this hub motor, it's marked as 36 volts. Well, that's basically the same as a 40-volt battery, except I already own this battery, so I didn't have to have a separate electric bike only battery. I also already had the charger for this battery. It has built-in BMS. I don't have to worry about designing any of that kind of stuff from scratch. So I put together this electric bike. It's using a 3D printed part to hold the battery, and that goes right where the water bottle mount would have been. So it's kind of standard screws, standard spacing. Now here in the middle, you can see I've got that the motor controller, kind of ugly, just held on with zip ties. It's not great. There's the motor. And so I played around with this a little bit. Here's the bracket that holds the battery. And then I ended up also using the 3D printer to design a part specifically for that motor controller. So I measured it, kind of made a big clip and a shape that would go right onto the down tube of the bicycle. And then also it's hollow from the bottom. And what that does is this gives me a spot to mount the motor controller, but then also get all the wiring out of the way. So the extra wiring, there's a lot of spare wires on there. Key switch and brake. It's not all stuff you need. There's usually a lot of leftover wires you don't use on a basic electric bike project. So it looks a lot nicer because those are all tucked out of the way. And that's what that looks like when that's all done. This is not a project that I've documented and made a good video on. That is definitely something that I want to go back, put the time into showing exactly how I did this. Put a torque arm on there too. Keep that motor from ripping out of the front forks. And here's a little bit also for the battery holder. I got some of these threaded inserts, and you can just use a soldering iron to melt them in. So this is the quick connect between the battery and the cable to the motor controller. And then these little inserts take the screws for a cover that goes down over this. And that's with the cover and the battery in place. Now, another really cool thing that you can use a plug-in vehicle for is as a source of power. If you just use a 12-volt inverter, which you can hook up to any gas car, but if you use it with a plug-in vehicle, you can basically use the power from that main battery pack. So here I've got our Chevy Volt, and I rigged up a inverter on it. Here I'm using a Xantrex 2000 watt inverter. I made some quick connects for it to go directly to the 12-volt battery, and then as long as the car is on, so the DC to DC converter is active, and you're getting the power from the main battery to the 12-volt battery, what's going to happen is that that battery always stays topped off. So, for example, here I'm running about 1,300 watts just from a electric space heater for testing. That's the actual inverter that I'm using. And then I made up some pretty heavy-duty cables going to an Anderson disconnect. This is probably a little on the overkill side, but better that than too thin, and I already had the cables available. So I used a circuit breaker and that quick disconnect. It just goes through the box that's on the left-hand side in the back of the Volt, and then that goes straight to the 12-volt battery, which is in the back on this particular car. So if I ever need emergency power, all I got to do is pull out my inverter, plug it in with this quick disconnect. And that's my daughter with a rat on her head. Now, the other big summer project was that my daughter found a go-kart for sale. We bought this for $100. It had a Briggs & Stratton engine on it, a gas engine, which was not in working condition. The fiberglass on the tail there was broken. There was a little bit of rust, but the fiberglass body actually looked pretty cool. I mean, it's a white Indy car. What's not to like about that? Number 8. So we bought it. We took it home. We cleaned it up and started work on converting it to electric. Actually towed it home. So here's my daughter washing it up to start with. And then we started the work converting it. So this is actually the electric motor I had in my original Kawasaki KZ440 electric motorcycle. Here you can see it's just mocked up. But we basically went through, designing a mount for the motor to go on, bolting that into the frame, adding the gearing for it, adding the gearing to the wheel. So here the motor is mounted to the bracket, did a little repainting of the frame. The big thing really was the batteries. Let's take a look here. I tried a couple different types of batteries. I had a 48-volt pack that I made up out of Nissan Leaf cells, but like these were so heavy it was literally like bending the back of the frame. The frame is essentially just conduit. There's like not much to it at all. Also experimented a little bit. Like I had one of these big old green lithium batteries. Same thing there. Only 12 volts and it weighed just a ton. Sort of less than ideal there. I also had some smaller batteries. I had a couple of little sealed lead acid ones. I welded on some pieces on the side that are hidden under the body, and those would be able to hold the batteries. But these were pretty small batteries, just really weren't going to give me the current that I wanted. And what was really cool was when I realized that I still have the high motion kit from our Prius. Now this kit quit working. The electronics inside failed, but the cells that were in it were still good. So I opened this thing up, take out the high power disconnect, and inside there's a whole bunch of these bricks of A123 batteries. And these are some really pretty nice cells. So then I experimented with fitting them in under the frame. A little too tight for 4 of them, but 2 of them, one on either side, seemed to work out pretty well. And then that's when we really had something that worked well. My daughter was having a lot of fun with that. Yeah, making faces. I do have a couple of video shorts doing some burnouts in this vehicle. Here's just some of the components. Meanwhile, power supply I'm using as a charger. All tracks, 24 to 48 volts, PWM motor controller. I did also have some people saying, oh my God, you can't have an exposed chain. Hair's going to get ripped out of her head. And I'm like, okay, cool. I got a 3D printer. I 3D printed a chain guard. And then, of course, everybody was saying, oh no, you can't have a plastic chain guard. Your chain's going to explode. The plastic's not going to stop it. I have never had a chain explode. Actually, this 3D printed part like this is way stronger than I actually thought it would be. But you know, it's the whole thing with like videos and comments. It's like you can't please everybody no matter what. But obviously, yeah, be safe. You know, put your hair up, have chain guards, things like that, of course, makes sense. Surprisingly, I actually even fit in the go-kart. Just barely. I have to wear it like a kayak. But boy, it's fun. And I found trying to do donuts, though, that the real issue was tensioning the chain, because the frame would flex enough that it would cause issues, cause the chain to fly off. So eventually I just decided to use a chain tensioner, and that really solved a lot of problems. This is the chain tensioner right here, the pulley, arm, this is the swivel, and then the spring, which I just had to heat and bend to make it work for this application. Once we really got everything working right with the go-kart, we found out it had over a 30-mile-an-hour top speed. So that's when I went and got the little girl a real race car helmet. But boy, this thing could really do, it could just fly, do burnouts, just a lot of fun. I stopped out at a county fair and got to see a Ford F-150 Lightning in person for the first time. They also had an all-electric Ford E-Transit, which was pretty cool as well. I picked up some cheap woodworking tools and got to play with them a little bit. There's my daughter with her new helmet. But I got this lathe working, so I did play around with that a little bit, trying to learn a little bit of wood turning. What was nice about this was that it was just sitting in my garage. I could go out there, put a piece of firewood on, play with it for 10 minutes, and have something cool to show for it. And that was pretty neat to be able to do. It was nice not having to go somewhere else or clean up immediately, things like that. Here's a little mallet that I made. But it was fun being able to do that kind of thing, not have it be too serious or anything, and just make something. Maybe a little bit different than my usual projects, but this is actually my grandmother's china pattern, and I always wanted a triple-tiered dessert tray. So I got myself some little diamond drill bits and a little kit, drilled some holes through, and I built my very own dessert tray that I couldn't otherwise find. Don't worry, I used the newer, less collectible style plates. Here's Mr. Bones in his winter tiny house. And then one of these little diamond bits that I used for the drilling. Here's the 2-tier version. You know, this is what my shop looks like, but, you know, that's what the photo looks like, because whatever's not in frame doesn't exist. And what else was kind of neat about this was I had a cousin getting married, so they did cupcakes for their dessert. So I brought this tray, and it was kind of cool that I had my grandmother's china pattern with the relatives' little dessert cupcakes on here. And what was sort of cool about it was when I took a tray of the cupcakes over to some relatives, and I passed my uncle, the stepfather of the groom, and he's like, "That's Grandma's china pattern," which was just kind of cool to have that noticed like that. Here's a little gnome home that I made on the lathe. This is drilled out from the bottom and then plugged, so it's actually hollow. again, just fooling around with wood. But it's kind of neat to be able to just make something, not have to put a lot of time and thought into it, and just have something to show for when you're done. So getting back to the electric bicycle, I was trying to do some hiking in October as kind of part exercise, part physical therapy, that sort of thing. And what I found was very motivating is if I could hike part of a national scenic trail we have here in Wisconsin called the Ice Age Trail, but going out and then back over the same piece of trail just didn't feel as good as going out one way. So I could bring my electric bicycle with me, zip down to one end of the trail and then hike back, or vice versa. And I was actually out in one area where they had a what do they call it? A restore. Habitat for Humanity has some of these thrift stores that they benefit Habitat for Humanity. And so I was out in this area, and I ended up driving to that store just because it was right by the segment of trail that I was doing anyways. Here's a snake. And what ended up happening was I saw some solar and battery equipment at this thrift store right when I walked in, and went, holy cow, what's the word on this? I got to talk to the manager. It was donated. It was for sale. So it was 2 inverters and 1 10 kilowatt hour battery. Generac is based in Wisconsin. They're not actually far from where I am. And I helped install 2 of the first of these systems in the state of Wisconsin back when it was Pika. So I actually know how to use all this stuff. So I ended up having to buy a bike rack also at the same thrift store so that I could have my bike on the back of the car, leaving room in the car to pack all of this inside. And so I ended up going out for a hike one day, and because of that, came home with an entire Generac solar system. This is probably around more than $12,000 worth of equipment, which I got for a steal because I was lucky enough to find it used, but also because I have experience with it, so I wasn't afraid to buy it because I knew what it was and then I'd be able to hook it up. So that was pretty fun dragging all that home. The batteries in these little individual units, pretty hefty individually. You have to move it apart at a time and then install it in the case. Pretty neat stuff, though. It was 2 inverters, and I took a look through. I did eventually get them both working. Here's the battery all put together. I did shoot some footage of actually how to install the battery. I still want to edit that together into a video. So the other thing that's really cool about all of this is the Generac PWRCell inverter it's a hybrid inverter. It's designed for on-grid, off-grid combination, selling back to the utility. You can do kind of whatever you want with it. So I've got it hooked up in my garage here with the battery. And on my garage, I have 24 solar panels, and they have microinverters. So they're designed to not be on when you're not using, when the grid's out. You can't use them at all. But because of this battery, I was actually able to find a mode where I could set it up where the Generac inverter would actually power on the solar panels. The solar panels would power everything the garage was connected to. And in fact, if I was making too much energy, what happens is the extra power would actually go back into the battery. So I totally got this set up for AC coupling. So I got all this Generac equipment for about $1,000, and now I can use my grid tie only solar panels during a blackout to power my house and also charge these batteries. Pretty cool. I was really excited about that. Next up was MakerFaire Milwaukee. So we took the electric go-kart out to show off at that event. It was pretty cool, a lot of fun at this interactive kids museum in downtown Milwaukee, Discovery World. The other fun part about all of this was I got to go hang out with some of the Power Wheels folks. I actually did get the car out on the track there. Now, this is designed for Power Wheels, not for go-karts. Different kind of a setup. But here, one of the Power Wheels guys got to take the car around for a couple of laps, unlike me, who crashed it immediately. Another kind of a fun thing was this guy was there from Chai Battery out of Chicago, and that is a heck of a sweet electric go-kart frame. They got some really nice batteries on there, and I think that's a 40 horsepower motor on that thing. It was just insane. There's our friend Leslie with his electric bike. So on the second day, my daughter Sophie was there, so we did get to drive the go-kart. Man, hard to keep up with her. Drive the go-kart over to the racetrack the Power Wheels folks had set up. And unfortunately, they couldn't ride in the afternoon, and then they were taking the track down very, very quickly once the last race was done. So she did get to go on the track, but it was when they were taking it down, so there was a lot of water all over. The track wasn't really set up. It was kind of funny, just water flying everywhere as she's zipping around here. But still, she got to have some fun doing that. And that was the end of that weekend there. I did another kind of a just fun, wacky 3D printer project. I designed a maze that fits inside of a water bottle. This is a 1 liter smart water bottle, and I designed this to go inside there. So it's a marble maze. And of course, it was a lot of work removing all the supports, but when I was all done, I had something that would slide right inside of the bottle, and then I could put a ball bearing in there, and then you just kind of have to roll it around to escape the maze. While I was working on that, I also played around a little bit with doing a time-lapse setup for my 3D printer, including this Bluetooth remote for my camera, so that every layer change, the print head goes all the way over to the side, and this finger presses that button to take a photo. And I played around a little bit with doing some time lapses, and for the most part, they turned out pretty good. I still have to do a little bit of work with stringing from when the print head moves from the middle off to the side to hit that button. But some of those animations I think really turned out pretty good. So as an update on that bottle maze, I created a little 3D printed piece on the bottom. And what that does is it catches the ball after you've gone through the maze. I made a little cutout right there for the ball to come out. It's kind of like a gumball machine, the way it catches on the bottom. And there's what that version of the project looks like. I still did do one more part to kind of fill in this spot at the top here. And since I was thinking about that kind of thing, I did print out a 3D project. Somebody else designed. I did not design this, but I was really happy with how the 3D print turned out. And what's really cool about this, you just crank this by hand, and a screw lifts the ball bearings from the bottom up to the top. Really cool. A little loud, but a lot of fun. And of course, now winter is kind of finally upon us. I need to make some more room in my garage so that I can work on my projects. I found that go-kart was taking up a lot of space. And what I ended up doing with it was literally hanging it from the ceiling, flipped it upside down, lifted it up, strapped it to the ceiling. There's 2 straps, front and back. It's up, it's out of the way, and we'll bring it back down in the spring. And that gave me some room to be able to actually put my car in the garage. And then this is a 3D printed part that I designed for the very top of the bottle to kind of fill in that space, make it look cool. Kind of a gothic escape from the wizard's castle kind of a theme. So that's basically it. I just really wanted to give you a overview of the projects that I worked on this year that maybe didn't necessarily make it into YouTube videos or you were less familiar with. Going into this next year, I definitely want to finish off that tractor project that's been sitting around far too long for a number of reasons we don't need to go into here, but I definitely want to get that finished off, get my garage space back. The other big thing that I want to do this next year is a little bit more with solar. Since I've got that Generac equipment now, that means that I can take my solar trailer and actually rig it up so that it's on a grid tie system, but in a blackout, I'd be able to use it as off-grid solar as well. So it should further reduce my electric bill and add capabilities to my electric system, which would be really cool. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoy these videos, and until next time, stay charged up.